I Have a Dream. Martin Luther King Jr. is considered to be one of the greatest, most passionate, and motivational speakers of all time. His 1963 I Have a Dream speech was delivered on Capitol Hill, and is still referred to today almost 60 years later. Dr. King was preaching his dream of political and social equality among all American citizens, regardless of ethnic background. Compared to our benign and generally tolerant society today, the 1960s were rather harsh, with segregation of whites and blacks, and fierce racism towards the blacks. Racial tension was high, with frequent lynching of blacks. America was in for a dark decade. This was the context of King's speech, thus having profound implications on American political discourse. A year later in 1964, the Civil Rights Act was instated. The extreme inequality and poor treatment of blacks in the South forced Dr. King to take action. King was desperate for a change, but stressed the importance of nonviolence. This is one of King's greatest aspects. One of the most powerful features regarding King's speech was invoking theological power and referring to Exodus in the Bible. Introducing divine right tends to have a particularly powerful effect when leading the masses. King's speech was one of the necessary aspects of blacks gaining equal rights. The atrocities against black Americans had to stop, and racial segregation had to end. King was already well known, and had well-established credibility. He spoke like it as well, with much confidence and exquisite paralinguistics, using pauses effectively and varying language. The hardships blacks faced since the abolition of slavery made King's speech extremely impactful and emotionally proximate, especially effective due to merging with so-called Christian ideals, which was prevalent amongst black Southerners. King uses enthusiastic language, and recalls on history, referring to the Emancipation Proclamation. The abolition of slavery was monumental, however segregation and the Jim Crow laws were still instated for the next 100 years, preventing blacks from living with equal economic standards. King was keen to mention this fact, and raise awareness to such a disgrace. A purely objective and rational interpretation of the Constitution would lead one to believe all Americans should have equal rights, regardless of skin color. The Founding Fathers may have known this, but perhaps, in order to be pragmatic, were unable to include them, especially considering slavery was instated when the Constitution was drafted. The speech was littered with metaphors and euphemisms. His emphasis on nonviolence may even be considered analogous to what Christ is said to have done, according to the Bible. Many of King's metaphors include the immensity of nature, such as vast ocean of material prosperity, mighty streams, oasis of justice, and mountain of despair. This is very effective, because it gives listeners vivid imagery, and is more captivating than drab rhetoric. I Have a Dream is vaguely organized as a metaphorical narrative with brilliant imagery and the tone of a government official. The enhanced appeal of King is primarily attributed to his phenomenal speaking ability. King tends to use extemporaneous delivery, assuming he may rehearse his speech beforehand for perfection, improvising when necessary. He managed to successfully change the paradigm of U.S. politics and ignited a spark that exploded into a revolution, changing the universe, in the most profound of ways. I would wish to know that Dr. King would speculate on our contemporary, seemingly harmonious society, with great delight to see how far we have come as a nation. The legacy of President Obama should be cherished to reflect how we've grown as a society, and what that signifies, at the very least, symbolically, even if you happen to disagree with his politics.